Welcome! If you're joining us today, then you probably are interested in a natural childbirth. And yay! Because for us, it's such a passion. And for me, it really was a life-changing experience.
Passion is an understatement. This is my life. There are just so many reasons to go natural.
The UK has just come out and said it. Women with uncomplicated pregnancies are better off in the hands of midwives than hospitals.
In a huge study of U.S. birth centers, only 6% of births ended in cesarean.
Natural childbirth is one of the best gifts you can give your baby.
It helps build your baby's microbiome, reduces risks of allergies, asthma, type 1 diabetes, and obesity.
Just remind yourself you are strong, you can do this. You are physically made to do this.
There was no other empowering feeling ever in my life other than being able to give birth naturally.
Hi, I'm Genevieve from the blog and YouTube channel Mama Natural. For many years now, my husband and I have been making videos and blog posts all about natural living. But my turning point really came with the natural childbirth of my son, Griffin, and later with the supernatural birth of my daughter, Paloma. Now I'm committed to help as many moms as possible experience natural childbirth and to help families live happier, healthier lives.
Hi, I'm Maura Winkler. I'm a registered nurse, birth doula, breastfeeding counselor, and placenta encapsulator.
Maura is a superhero in the natural world.
Well, thank you. I live with my husband and daughter who was born at home naturally. And my big passion is helping couples have informed, empowered birth experiences.
Let me tell you a story. When I was pregnant with my first child, Griffin, I reconnected with some high school friends. So there was 4 of them and we were all out to lunch. Now they were already moms. So I was so curious like how their births went and everything like that. I was researching kind of natural childbirth. And I was shocked to learn that 3 of them had C-sections. And I was just
Oh my goodness.
wow,
Yeah.
and I understand, thank God we have C-sections.
Mm-hmm.
They save lives. They are incredible. And there's definitely sometimes a need for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that 3 out of 4, something was wrong there.
Yes. The C-section rate in the United States is actually 33%. 1 in 3 babies born by cesarean.
Wow.
World Health Organization tells us that the most optimal C-section rate for moms and babies' health outcomes is 10 to 15%.
So I decided I wanted to take a different path. I really wanted to go natural, but it seemed like society was kind of working against me. So what can we do?
Yeah, it really is hard, but in my experience as a doula, after attending over 100 births, I found there definitely are some effective strategies you can use to get there.
Maura and I are really jazzed about this because we've put together an online childbirth education course. So I'm looking forward to telling you all about this later, but for now, let's dive into those 8 tips that will help you have an empowered and natural childbirth. Most moms don't just stumble into a natural childbirth. I hate to say that, but it's true, right?
It
I mean,
is.
it's very few are that fortunate.
Yes, even though birth is natural and normal, it isn't easy.
And I think a lot of my girlfriends, they didn't want to have interventions. They were open to having a natural childbirth, but at the end of the day, they didn't really make that decision. They didn't really commit.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to do so.
It is, and I think that everyone really does have a different reason for why they want a natural childbirth. For me, it was really all about the bonding. I knew that there were so many hormones that came into labor and birth that really helped with bonding and helped me really connect to my baby as soon as my baby was born. And I didn't want to do anything that would disrupt that perfect cascade of hormones.
For me, it was really seeing my mom's C-section scar. I know that sounds terrible, but she had a C-section back in the day where it was literally from the pubic bone all the way to the sternum bone. And so it was a big scar. Yeah. And I hate hospitals. I hate needles. I don't like doctors. No offense. I just don't like that whole scene. And so I wanted to avoid that if at all possible. So that was my driving force. So I really encourage you, if you want to have a natural childbirth, think about why. Post that up in your room, look at it daily, because this is going to be your driving force when the going gets rough in labor. Natural birth is a marathon, so we need to train for it.
Yeah, so you wouldn't show up to a marathon without ever having run a mile.
Such a great point. So we definitely want to be moving our bodies every day,
Yes.
whether that's walking or swimming or whatever exercise works for you, because that's just going to help keep our bodies balanced and open. I think for a lot of first-time moms, we work. That's what I did at least. And so I sat at a desk for 8 hours a day. I drove to and from work. And what happens in that kind of lifestyle is our pelvis can get really unbalanced. The muscles around that whole area can get tight and just tense and that sort of thing. And this doesn't really work well for natural childbirth. So we have to kind of counteract that. And how can we do that?
So babies are going to take the path of least resistance. So they're going to kind of settle into a place in your pelvis based on how your muscles and ligaments are aligned, and like Genevieve mentioned, how tight they are. So we really want to look at and pay attention to what position our baby is in throughout our pregnancy, because it's going to make labor and birth easier if the baby is in a good position.
Yes.
So of course, we want baby to be head down. That's most ideal. And I think that's the one thing that providers focus on the most, but that's not the only thing. There's a whole lot else going on besides the baby just being head down. Ideally, we would like the baby to be left occiput anterior, which means that their occiput bone back here is against the anterior of the pelvis, and the baby's back is on the left side. So the baby is going to come into the pelvis with this part of their head leading. And as you can see here, we have a nice soft spot or fontanelle, which allows the bones to mold and change shape so that your baby can fit more easily through the pelvis.
Which is what we want.
Exactly.
I think this baby's hilarious because he's like doing, like a baby will not be like that in your womb most likely. But
Yes, this
you
baby
get the
is
idea.
very long.
Yes,
yeah.
he is.
And so this is LOA, or left occiput anterior. Another similar position would, of course, be right occiput anterior. The positions that we want to avoid most are left occiput posterior and right occiput posterior.
So basically a posterior baby.
Exactly.
And sometimes you hear this called sunny side up, and a lot of times when your baby's in this position, you will really struggle with back labor.
Yes, so you can see this baby is kind of coming up right against this tailbone here, and not only does it hurt, but the baby just literally cannot get into the pelvis. So women can have really long labors. They can have irregular contractions, things just not really picking up the way that it's supposed to.
I had that.
Yes, these are like the 4-day labor marathons that you hear about.
So we want to do exercises to basically prevent posterior babies. We can't always prevent, but there are some things we can do. So I have a great blog post up about some exercises you can do to get your baby in optimal position. But if you think about it just intuitively, some stretching, prenatal yoga can really help. Kind of doing cat-cows, where you stretch your hips and your pelvic area.
Exactly.
So just try to think about that throughout your day. And also, if you do work, get up and walk around. If you can, every 15 and 20 minutes. I mean, maybe you're doing that because you have to go to the bathroom so frequently, but just walk around more and more so you're keeping your body a little bit more balanced. When you're watching movies at night, don't recline back. Try to sit more forward.
Sit on a birth ball even.
That's a great idea. We also want to be sure we're eating well. And this is kind of a no-brainer. Most of us, when we get pregnant, we kind of clean up our diet. But just be sure you're eating a real foods diet, low in the processed foods. We're just going to feel better. We'll have less complications probably. So just a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, I mean, remember that you are literally building your baby for the long term. So when you're eating, think, what am I feeding my baby right now?
You know what, Maura? I actually had 2 doulas at my first birth.
Wow, you're lucky.
I was very lucky. The way it all happened was I was in labor, and it was on a Saturday, and my main doula had to teach a class. So she had her backup come over, who I really liked too. So we were laboring and laboring and laboring. We finally get to the hospital, and then my original doula came back to kind of take over. But the backup doula said, Genevieve, would you mind if I stayed? Because I'm just having so much fun. Which I'm like, really? You're having fun? Because I'm dying over here. So she ended up staying. So I had 2 doulas, which was so helpful because I had a 27-hour birth. I had 4 hours of pushing. So I needed the support. Michael needed the support. It was just such a gift.
So doulas are actually professionally trained to support women during pregnancy, labor, and postpartum. They usually meet with their clients during pregnancy a couple of times to get to know them. They go to the birth. Most doulas have been to quite a few births. I myself have been to over 100 now.
Wow.
And then they follow up with their client postpartum to help with things like breastfeeding and newborn care.
Yeah, and I actually found those pre-visits and those post-visits were so helpful.
Yes.
Now let's go into why would someone want to hire a doula? Because it is an investment. What are some of the benefits?
Women who have doulas are more likely to have spontaneous vaginal births, less likely to have pain medication, epidurals, vacuum, or forceps-assisted births, less likely to have a cesarean section, and less likely to have negative feelings about childbirth.
Wow, that is awesome. I mean, who doesn't want that?
And that's not all. Other benefits of having a doula include a higher breastfeeding success rate, better maternal self-esteem, lower blood pressure during labor, and amazingly, less pain experienced.
Sign me up. Okay, so if you are going to hire a doula, I think it's really important to interview them. You
Yes,
want to
it
interview a
is.
couple of them, actually, because this woman's going to see you naked. She's going to see you freaking out. She's going to see you
Moaning.
moaning, maybe some of you throwing up.
Yes.
She's going to see you in the most intimate, powerful time of your life in a lot of ways, and most vulnerable time. So you want to be sure you feel really comfortable with them. So you meet with them. I always met for like tea, and just have a conversation with them. And a lot of it is just kind of a gut feel.
Yes.
Do you feel comfortable? I also think it's important to think about your style, like when
Yes.
you're stressed or you're in pain, what do you feel most comfortable with? Someone who's a little bit, hands off, behind the scenes, gentle, really comforting and nurturing?
Yes.
Or do you like more of a in-your-face coach style, you can do this, let's make a plan kind of
Yes.
personality?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to also know what their qualifications are like. So, for example, most of the clients that hire me love that I am a nurse and a doula, so they can kind of get a balance of all of the things that doulas provide, as well as someone who knows a lot of the evidence-based information about pregnancy and childbirth. But doulas may have other skill sets. They may be trained in massage or be trained in baby positioning. And depending on what you're looking for, you really want someone to have that skill set that you want.
Now, I know some partners can feel threatened or maybe wonder why you need a doula. Could you speak to this?
Yes, that is such a common concern. That comes up in interviews with clients all the time. And the fact is, your doula knows birth and your partner knows you, and together they are a really great team. Not to mention, your doula is going to make your partner look like a rock star because she's going to be behind the scenes telling your partner exactly where to touch you, what to say, and just how to be really, really supportive. And we also have to think about, how is your partner when they haven't had anything to eat or drink? How are they when
Great
they haven't
point.
slept? Because your doula is going to give them an opportunity to take care of themselves throughout your labor, which may be long.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point and super important. Now, how would someone go about finding a doula if they wanted to look one up or find one in their area?
The thing that's awesome about doulas is that they are working only for you. So generally, they're not working for the hospital, they're not working for your provider, so they really only have your interests in mind. So usually doulas are self-employed, although there are some doula agencies, but really the best place to look for a doula is on doulamatch.net, or you can just Google doula and your city name or zip code.
Finally, doulas can be an investment. So the cost kind of varies, but I think it's important to realize hiring a doula is a lot cheaper than a C-section or an epidural. And with
Yes.
those statistics of how much they can help, I think they are worth their weight in gold.
Yes, not to mention how long they're going to be with you and the fact that they're going to drop everything and come to you in labor.
In terms of providers, you really have four main options.
OBGYNs are your traditional care providers for pregnant women, as well as all stages of reproductive life. Family medicine doctors are physicians that can care for both a pregnant woman as well as her future newborn and child.
Now, this is kind of old school, right? I mean,
Exactly, like you imagine the family doctor with their black bag kind of coming to your house. That's
Doing home
exactly-
visits? Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, not
Yeah.
many of them do that anymore, but family medicine doctors do tend to be a little bit more holistic. So if you can find one in your community, it's great continuity of care. Yeah. And then we also have nurse midwives, which are nurses that have additional training specifically in midwifery. And then finally, certified professional midwives, which are only licensed in some states, and they are only midwives, not nurses.
So really choosing your provider can really make or break your natural childbirth. You really want to be sure that you're aligned on important issues. So what are some great questions more that we could ask a provider to be sure we're kind of in sync?
I think the take-home point is really that you want to get numbers back. So whatever questions you're asking, you want a percentage or a rate, and if they don't know what those numbers are, they're probably not good. So some examples of questions: what is your C-section rate? How many of your patients have an unmedicated birth? don't use natural birth, because a lot of providers think that natural is the same thing as just having a vaginal birth, even if you had pain medication during that. Things like, what happens if my water breaks and I'm not having contractions yet? What happens if I go overdue? And again, you want exact answers about when they're going to be offering you interventions for, various issues.
I think as a general rule, if you can find a midwife that you can deliver with, that's probably your best bet if you have a low risk pregnancy.
Yes, and actually evidence tells us that midwives are the safest providers for low risk women because they have less interventions and better health outcomes for mothers and babies.
And this can be tricky because I know a lot of my friends, they had close relationships with their OBGYN. Maybe they've been seeing them since they first got their period, so like 13 years old.
Yeah.
They love these people, and it's hard for them to leave the doctor that they know and trust and go to someone new. But the thing is that doctor might not be into natural childbirth, and so
exactly.
you want to be sure you know what their C-section rates are and kind of how they think about these things.
Yeah, one of the things I hear a lot with clients and potential clients is they say, well, my doctor is so nice. They have a great bedside manner. I really like them. And I know as the professional on the other side of the equation that maybe their doctor has literally the highest C-section rate in the city. And they might be really nice and they might be really great if you do need a cesarean or if you need some more interventions. But for a woman who's planning a natural birth, that may not be your best choice. And
another thing that can be really tricky is this has happened to another friend of mine where she loved this particular doctor in a practice. And she knew that this doctor was really on board with her, was pro, having a natural childbirth, that sort of thing. But then when she went into labor, she got a different doctor. And that doctor wasn't so into low interventions. So you really want to make sure that the whole practice is aligned as well.
I see this all the time. And I think that a lot of times women don't even meet with the other doctors in the practice. So sometimes they just assume, well, they're probably all on the same page, which isn't often the case. Or they just hope, well, maybe I'll get my doctor. There's a 1 in 5 chance. I'll play the odds. And then they've kind of regretted after the birth playing those odds if they got someone who really did not support their birth plan. Sometimes I actually see providers saying, well, why don't we schedule an induction of labor for when I'm on call so that you can have me at your birth? And for a lot of women, even if they want a natural birth, that can be tempting because they're like, okay, I really know this person. We have a relationship. Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe we should just do the induction and then I can have my doctor and they're supportive of all my other plans. Well, I think that having interventions right at the start of labor really increases the chances of having other interventions.
Your provider is so important because they dictate where you're going to give birth, and that can really influence whether you get interventions or not.
Yes, that is huge. So I've had a couple clients that actually did have pretty good providers, but I knew that they practiced in hospitals that had really high rates of interventions, things that were just hospital policy and were really hard to resist.
Yeah, and work around.
Exactly. So I think what's really important as you're thinking about your provider is to interview a variety of providers, figure out what locations they deliver in, and really compare the locations as well. And
so not just the providers, but also compare the locations and look at the locations rates of stuff. Could you call a hospital and say, what's your rate of C-section?
Yeah, and again, if they don't know, it's not good. And just know it's never too late to switch providers. So I actually had a client who interviewed me as her doula around 36 or 37 weeks, which was pretty late to hire a doula, but I still had some availability. And she was with a provider who was not very supportive, delivered at this beautiful, state-of-the-art hospital right on the lake.
Those are usually the worst.
Yes, interventions make money, so sometimes...
The prettier the hospital,
the more interventions.
You want to stay away from it, yeah.
Exactly. So she ended up interviewing some midwives, and I always think that it's a great idea to interview a few providers, even if you're not sure you're going to switch, you're not sure you want to, just interview them so that you feel like you are making an informed choice. And so she interviewed a midwife group literally the next day, basically hired them on the spot, and went into labor maybe a week or two later, had an awesome natural water birth that never would have happened at this other facility.
That's awesome. Where you give birth is super important if you want a natural childbirth because some places have more interventions than others. So Maura, where can we give birth?
You basically have 3 choices: hospital, birth center, or home.
or the car.
Or that. Sometimes
That
you're better off.
Yeah, that actually happened to my cousin. It was her third baby. She was in the bath. She was drinking a glass of wine, trying to just relax. And then she realized, wow, this labor's kind of picking up. So she heads down to the car. Her husband's, coming along, and she has a massive contraction. And she's basically crowning. I mean, like literally where the baby just all of a sudden gets so locked and loaded. And she is freaking out like, oh my gosh, honey, we've got to get going. Like, we have to get to the hospital. They get in the car. Well, they live in Manhattan, okay? So let's just say the traffic there is horrific. He's trying to like drive around all these taxis. And she proceeded to give birth because when you get that pushing instinct,
You can't stop it.
You really can't.
It's a reflex.
She pushes, she brings the baby up to her chest, and she said the first thing she did was look at the clock and said, it's 9:10, because she knew like
is hilarious.
instinctively, like it was important to mark what time is it. So obviously that's not ideal, but that is a place where you could give birth.
Yeah.
But I thought what we could do now is kind of unpack the different places. So let's start with hospital because that tends to be the most popular place for women to give birth.
Exactly. So hospitals are a place to give birth for sure if you are anticipating that you or your baby might need some extra medical intervention because they have all of the tools to make that happen.
Absolutely.
However, if you're planning a natural birth, that actually may not be a good thing. So just looking at what is available in a typical hospital room, you're going to have, a small bed. The bottom of the bed is actually going to come off so that you would potentially, hopefully not, but be on your back pushing sort of in the position with your knees up towards your chest, like the traditional position to give birth.
Like what we see in Hollywood.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
There's going to be all kinds of medical equipment there. So there's going to be things to monitor you and your baby. There's going to be things like oxygen and suction attached to the wall. There's going to be fluorescent lighting and a big giant light that's going to come down probably when your baby is crowning and to stitch you up if you tear. And there's also going to be a baby warmer. So if your baby needs some extra special attention after birth, they would go here to be kind of checked out.
Of course, my first instinct is like, Mama's the baby warmer,
yes,
but I guess
Mama's the
there
best
are
one.
sometimes that could be.
Yeah.
I remember when we toured different places in the hospital, I just remember seeing lots of instruments everywhere. Like it's a lot
Yes.
more. I mean, that's what they're there for,
Technical.
Yeah, exactly, to use the tools that they have.
Yeah, this is really the only place that you can have a cesarean or get pain medication.
Gotcha. Now let's move on to a birthing center. I think these are fabulous. Let's talk
Yes.
about kind of what this looks like.
A birth center is like giving birth at someone else's home. So
That's a great way to put it.
It has a very homey kind of environment. Usually there's a queen or king size bed instead of a hospital bed. Usually they do have medical equipment, but it's kind of hidden away behind cupboards. So it just looks homey.
It
Again.
does. It does. That's where we gave birth. So it was like a king size bed.
Exactly.
Carpeting, pictures on the wall. It just was a real comfy feeling.
Yeah, and they can do some interventions here, and they do have the equipment to do them, but it's definitely used less frequently just because for women that are giving birth in a birth center, usually they're low risk and don't need a lot of intervention.
And these are usually run by midwives. Is that
Exactly.
correct? Okay. And then finally, we have the option of giving birth at home. And I know this is near and dear to your heart because that's how you gave birth.
Yes, yeah. I actually had a wonderful home birth that was so empowering for me. And at home, the midwives actually do bring a lot of the same equipment that you find in the hospital or at a birth center. And usually they have a plan for transfer of care. If things become complicated during labor or during your pregnancy and you're going to need some interventions that you would find at the hospital. But most of the time for a low risk woman, she can have a successful, very safe home birth because birth generally goes okay if you kind of leave it alone.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, in terms of statistics, where is the safest place to give birth or, where would you recommend for a low risk woman?
Birth centers. So studies actually show that birth centers are the safest place to give birth for a couple of reasons. One is that they're run by midwives, and midwives are actually the safest providers for low risk women and have the best health outcomes for moms and babies using less interventions. The other reason that birth centers are great is because they're kind of an in-between for home and hospital. So they don't have all the interventions that hospitals have. They're not quite as minimalistic as home. It's sort of like the perfect in-between.
So be sure to check it out. If there is a birthing center near you, make an appointment, take a tour, and see if you like it.
One word of caution though, a lot of the labor and delivery units are actually calling themselves birthing centers. So they'll say it's the family birthing center. And
And this is in a hospital,
yes,
you mean? Okay.
they've sort of caught on that this whole birth center thing, people really like it. And so they're marketing it. And in reality, it's just a labor and delivery unit that's called a birthing center, but it's really not. It's not run by midwives. It's not a low intervention place to give birth.
Gotcha. If you want to have a natural childbirth, it's super important that you know what's going on with your body anatomically, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions.
Yes, take dilation as an example. A lot of people think that all that contractions do is dilate the cervix, when in reality, contractions do a whole lot of things. Of course, yes, they do dilate the cervix, but they also efface the cervix or thin it out, help to rotate the baby's head into a better position to fit through the pelvis, help the baby to descend lower into the pelvis, into the vagina, and mold the baby's head so that it can fit more easily through the pelvis and into the vagina. So we can see here's our baby in a great position for labor. The cervix is very thick though before labor starts, and so before it can really dilate, it needs to efface or thin out. We can see that this is what's happening here. Very little dilation, lots of thinning. You might actually lose your mucus plug sometimes during early labor. That's what that is. And the amniotic bag can break at any time, but this is what it would look like. Once the cervix has thinned all the way, it can dilate more easily and quickly, as we see here. Now that the cervix is gone, the second stage of labor, or pushing, begins. We can see the baby rotating under the pubic bone. And now we can see that the top of the uterus is actually much thicker than it was in the beginning, which will help to push the baby out. The baby is continuing to rotate until we can see that the baby is actually crowning. In order for the baby's head to fit, the bones need to mold, which actually means that the head is going to change shape. Now we can see that the baby's head is emerging. Once the head is out, the baby's going to rotate to the side. And then one shoulder will come out, and then the other. Once the shoulders are out, the rest of the baby's body comes out quite quickly and easily.
At some point during most labors, there comes a time where interventions start to be discussed. And this is where things can really go south.
Yes.
So what's a mama to do?
Well, the first question you want to ask is this an emergency, or do we have time to talk about it? And most of the time, we have time to talk about it.
We got time. Okay, that's
Yes.
good, right? So sit back, breathe.
Yes.
And then what do we do?
And then remember your BRAIN. So BRAIN stands for benefits, risks, alternatives, intuition, and no or not now.
So can we take an intervention like Pitocin through the brain? Show me what that looks like.
Yeah, let's talk about Pitocin, because actually I think about 70% of women get Pitocin during labor, which is crazy.
It is, wow.
But some of the benefits of Pitocin would be that if other options have been exhausted, then it actually can help you have a vaginal birth. So if you've been in labor for a really long time, maybe your uterus is really tired,
That happened to
then
me.
then you could have a little hit of pit, so they say, to help you along.
And that's what happened with Griffin. I had been going along for 26 hours, and I'd been pushing for, I think, 3 or 4, and he just was not, my uterus was exhausted. That was really the
Yes.
problem. So we tried some other natural ways to get things moving, and it just wasn't working. So I had a hit of pit, and within 20 minutes, he was out vaginally. So I was really happy with that because, you know, like you said, it can help.
Yeah, but there are definitely risks to Pitocin. So some of these risks include having contractions that are longer, stronger, and closer together than your body would normally do. And as a result of these really long, intense, close together contractions, sometimes babies actually don't really tolerate Pitocin very well, which means that your baby could have heart rate issues that could lead to intervention such as a C-section to get them out faster.
And they really monitor that, because I remember that up until that point, I was free as a bird. You know, I could do whatever I wanted. And all of a sudden, they have this huge monitor on me, and they're always checking Griffin's vitals. And thankfully, I
Exactly.
think because it was such a low amount and he was so deep into my pelvis, like it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yes.
But I could see if you started a lot earlier that could really build up in the baby system and cause some issues.
Yeah, exactly. When you have Pitocin, you are going to have some other interventions that come with it automatically. So one is something called continuous fetal monitoring, and that is when they're going to have bands strapped to your belly, which are recording the baby's heart rate and your contraction pattern. And these bands can, like you said, really restrict your movement and sometimes make women stay close to the bed, which can affect their ability to tolerate the pain. So one of the things that happens with Pitocin sometimes is that women who were not planning to have pain medication end up getting an epidural because they're not able to handle how close those contractions are, especially if they can't really move around.
If we get to the A of brain, the alternatives, what are our choices?
I think the first one is really just wait. So if you and baby are doing okay, then just wait it out. You know, labor can ebb and flow. It's not linear, and we don't expect progress to be linear. So, you know, just seeing what your body is going to do on its own and having a provider who's willing to wait it out is so important.
You know, that's really a great point, because with Griffin, he never showed any signs of distress. It was more I was showing signs of distress. But for some reason, my provider really wanted to kind of, I think she had a lot of women in labor that night or something and really wanted to kind of speed it along. So I wonder what would have happened if we just waited.
You can also try things like nipple stimulation or breaking the bag of water to help move things along.
How about the I of intuition?
Intuition really just means what is your gut telling you. So after you consider all of these benefits and risks and really work through the logic of this whole thing, a lot of times you just have kind of a reaction, like a really strong intuition of what you should do.
And then the N just means declining, right?
Yeah, so no or not now. And really what the thing is with declining that's so important is that you need to be able to communicate with your provider effectively. So saying things like, you know what, we understand that you're concerned that my cervix hasn't dilated anymore, but as long as baby and I are doing okay, we would really like to wait a little bit longer before starting Pitocin. So always validate the concerns of the nurse or the healthcare provider, and then just tell them, you know, what your plan is, and even give them a time. So say, can you come back at 4 o'clock and we can talk about this again?
Thank you so much, Maura. This is such a great tool. And just remember, Mama, that you can take any intervention and run it through the brain.
So Genevieve, guess where I was a few years ago?
Where?
In medical school.
You, the queen of crunch?
Yes, can you believe
No.
it? So I actually went to medical school because I wanted to help women and babies have healthy, low-intervention pregnancies and births. When I got there, that was not what was happening.
Really?
Yes. I felt like the medical model of childbirth really wants to do interventions and to find complications with everything, when usually birth works okay if we just leave it alone.
So what were you seeing in the hospital?
So I've actually got a great story that pretty much exemplifies exactly what the medical model of childbirth is. One time I was observing an exchange between a resident who is kind of still a learning physician, what I would have been soon after I got out of med school had I stayed, and her attending physician who is the higher up. And the resident was kind of evaluating a woman who came in early labor, and the attending said to the resident, "What do you want to do with this woman?" And the resident said, "Well, I want to pit her and break her."
Whoa, what
Yes.
does that even mean?
It's a lot of strong language.
Yeah, that is. That sounds really violent.
Yes, like you are really doing something to a woman.
Yeah.
But basically it means that this resident wanted to give her Pitocin and break her bag of water to speed up the labor process. And this attending physician actually happened to be one of the few who was pretty hands-off, which is rare. And she said, well, why don't we just leave her alone? Why would we do those things? And so they did. They left her alone, and she had a vaginal birth several hours later, no Pitocin, and it was literally the first time this resident had seen someone give birth without Pitocin.
Wow.
Yes.
That is so sad. It's just so sad how we have medicalized something that could be so natural.
Yes.
And that's why being educated is so huge. It's probably the most important thing to do if you want an empowered and educated childbirth. So you want to be sure you pick the right childbirth education course, though. Now, I took a childbirth education course when I was first pregnant. Did you take one?
Yeah, I actually did too, even though I was already a doula at the time and I had all the knowledge. My partner didn't have that knowledge, and I also wanted to be able to practice some of those pain coping techniques and get out of the community that comes with taking a class.
That's a great point. Now, I know that you like to delineate with your clients that it needs to be an out-of-hospital education course. What's up with that?
Huge, because the hospital classes really teach you how to be a good patient. So they tell you what happens at their hospital. They really don't give you a balanced view of the options and choices that you have available.
Yes, Michael and I took a childbirth education course, and we liked it for so many reasons. I mean, first of all, it was super educational, but the thing I think we liked the most about it was that we created a wonderful community. So we met a lot of other natural, crunchy mamas, and it was awesome just to be friends with them. I'm still friends with some of them, and to hear their birth stories. But I have to say, there were some things I didn't like about it. First of all, it was really long. It was 12 weeks. So that's 3 months. That's like a whole trimester of my pregnancy. And let me just tell you, when I'm getting bigger and bigger and my ankles are starting to swell a little bit, I just don't feel like getting in my car, you know, at night, driving across town and then sitting there, you know, sitting for hours and hours sometimes isn't always very comfortable.
Yes.
And then sometimes I felt like I was also being kind of, you know, preaching to the choir kind of things coming up, where they were talking about things like, we don't want to have Pitocin if we can help that, and they're going on and on and on. It's like, I get it. Like, I'm here, you know, I'm natural. I want to have a natural childbirth. I don't want to have it. You don't have to keep hammering this home. So actually, Maura and I are friends, and so we started kind of talking about this and wondering, like, could we do it differently?
Yeah, and honestly, I've heard a lot of the same sentiments from my clients, and people would say, oh, is there any kind of online class? And up until now, there really hasn't been.
And then when I polled kind of our Mama Natural community, I also heard similar complaints, you know, that it was too long, that it was, you know, far away, or maybe there wasn't even a good one in their local community. So that's when we thought, could we come together and create something that could be really fresh and modern and succinct yet comprehensive that could really serve moms out there who want to go for a natural childbirth? Yes, Maura and I realized that we made a great team. Maura is a registered nurse, doula, breastfeeding counselor, placenta encapsulator, and student midwife. You don't get more crunchy than that. I mean, wow.
Are you kidding me? You are Mama Natural. So Genevieve has been running a natural living blog inspiring moms to have healthier lifestyles, natural births, and breastfeed.
So we are super excited to do things differently. Here's what you can expect from our 8-week course. It's all online, on demand, so you can watch them whenever you want.
It's evidence-based, which means that it's backed up by research, statistics, and studies. As a midwife, that is so important to me. It's up to date, which means no women with perms and grainy VHS videos.
You'll also hear from mamas, specialists, and papas, because we've designed these courses for your partners too. As I mentioned before, Michael and I loved meeting the couples in our natural childbirth course, so community is so important. That's why we'll be linking our students into online groups. So you will meet others who are pregnant right along with you. You guys can share your experiences.
You'll also be able to hear each other's birth stories, and let me tell you, there's nothing more encouraging and inspiring than hearing and sharing birth stories.
And Maura is going to be active in these groups, so she'll be able to answer questions and offer encouragement throughout your pregnancy. So who is this class for?
You have a desire to go natural, to give that gift to yourself and your baby. You want to be informed and empowered. It also might be a great resource for doulas in training, future midwives, or anyone who's a birth junkie.
As a thank you for joining us on this webinar today, we'd like to offer you a free upgrade to the class. Now we have 3 different enrollment options, and we will give you a complimentary upgrade from our Birth Scholar option to our Advanced Placement. With Advanced Placement, you will get a comprehensive 8-week video course, practice videos for you and your partner, printable cheat sheets and resource guides, access to private Facebook groups moderated by me and Maura, special training classes for VBAC birth, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, you'll get these bonuses: childbirth affirmation audio recordings, our cheat sheet to natural labor, you'll definitely want this on hand for your big day, how to save money on real food ebook, the best-selling prenatal exercise video, and the Master Breastfeeding course. This is almost 2 hours of content all about nursing. That's over $100 worth of upgrades, and you will get it all for our lowest possible enrollment price. Now, I'm going to email you special links so you can take advantage of this offer. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox or check your spam mail if you don't see it. And finally, I'd like to share just a few testimonials from students who've completed this course. If you want to learn more about our course, you can click the button on this page and we'll send you a follow-up email with more information. But if the Mama Natural Birth course is not for you, no worries. We would just encourage you to please sign up for some childbirth education course.
But please, not the half-day one at the hospital.
We hope that these 8 tips were helpful for you, and we are wishing you just the smoothest, healthiest pregnancy and birth.